Welcome to another episode of Morning Mojo with me, your host Shane Solomon. Today on the sofa, joining me in the studio is Laura Lloyd. I'm going to get straight into the content, Laura, and we're going to talk about eating psychology for those people waking up and needing the Morning Mojo advice and tips from you about eating psychology. Let's get into it.
Oh, good morning, everybody. Eating psychology is all about thinking into our thoughts and feelings behind our eating behaviors. Okay. And I came to eating psychology because I was a binge eater, but actually the people I work with every day are not particularly disordered eaters. They just wake up and they have a lot of body image thoughts, and maybe the day ahead looks like a blinking gymkhana of eating challenges. And often they do very well until about 2:00 in the afternoon. And then their hands in a packet of crisps, or they're visiting the vending machine, or they get home from work and they have sort of forgotten to eat, and they walk in through the door and straight to the pantry and stand in the pantry looking for reward, looking for something to give them energy to get through the evening if they're tired, looking for entertainment. And really, when we look at why we eat more than we think we should, it's all to do with the knock-on effects of our work day and our emotional life. And being an eating psychology coach is about kind of bringing that emotional life from the sort of unseen and unconscious into our awareness so that we can start to work with it.
Yeah, right. Great explanation. I mean, the thing is, and we are all conscious. Well, I believe we're all conscious that when you get up in the morning, first thing you do, for me certainly, brushing the teeth, and there's a mirror there. You know, straight away, bang, in your face, they have some of that. And I'm not liking what I see there. You know, I've got more chins than the Chinese phone directory. I'm thinking, this is not good. I need to do this. I'll skip breakfast this morning. And then straight, I'm on the spiral. Now I'm feeling bad because I like a good fry up every single day, but I can't have that, and then, this is just a minefield. And I think, and being in business as well, you're presenting yourself, right? So you're out there trying to get new clients, look after the clients you got. So people listening to this podcast and watching it are probably conscious of how they look and how they present to others. And it's just such a big subject. So where do you start? I mean,
it's at the heart of our self-esteem, isn't it? And how we all have that inner critic inside, and it turns on us about our looks first and foremost. And it's been around for decades, and it's conditioned.
Oh, I love that word. Conditioning, yeah.
Right, and we're constantly comparing ourselves to a fantasy ideal.
Yeah, Brad Pitt, and I look at him, I think, why does he look like that? And I look like this. I'm fugly. He's not. Why is that?
Or we compare ourselves to the self we were when we were 19, right? Our past self. And we think, I've got to get back to the weight I was or the way I was. We're very non-self-accepting. And then from that place of, I'm not all right, I've got to make an effort to fix myself, we put a lot of extra, just subtle inner pressure on ourselves. And that has a knock-on effect too, because if you can imagine, and I think this was really true for me as a binge eater, right? When our self-talk is very much in the I should, and I think that the fitness industry works a lot in this space of you've got to look after yourself. You must protect your health, but it all comes across as pressure. I've got to, I have to, I must, I should. And then we use an inner energy of determination and willpower, which we all know is quite a limited resource. And that's why we can do a diet for a couple of weeks, but then something stressful happens at work, or our routine changes, or we get demoralized for some reason, or we have a bad night's sleep, and suddenly we can't maintain that ultimate sort of strict focus and concentration on our health. And then it all goes out the window and we're like, oh, well, to hell with it. And then I'll start over. And we get into these cycles of being good, being what we think is bad, beating ourselves up over it, feeling like a personal failure. So we stack all of this poor self-esteem on top of poor self-esteem and just feel like, well, I can be an amazing success in my business, but behind the scenes, every day I'm going to bed feeling guilty and regretful about who I am to my eating self. And it's a kind of rupture in our relationship with ourselves.
It's that emotion. I think for me, as a big boned kind of guy covered in meat and gravy, it's all about how I feel. And, you know, when I'm eating a Chinese or a full English breakfast or a fish and chips or an Indian, all these wonderful healthy foods, you know, I feel bloody fantastic. And then afterwards, oh, I shouldn't have had all that. You know, I should have had half the egg fried rice. I've just nailed a whole freaking carton on my own.
Yes. Yeah. And that's
and a pasty as well for supper.
It's really worth noticing that for those, 7 seconds when you're putting something in your mouth, your brain really thinks it's helping you. It really thinks this will give you some relief. And the question is, like, what are you looking for the relief from at that moment? Why does it? Of course, it tastes good.
Yeah, the chicken curry at Manfoon House, I'm telling you, is a whole new level.
Sure. But that's how we're wired. You see, our brains have what's called a motivational triad. We're wired to seek pleasure, avoid pain or discomfort or emotional discomfort of any kind, be it boredom, overload, stress. Seek pleasure, avoid pain, and make life easy. And of course, a takeaway fulfills all of that, to a T. So what can you do?
What can I do? What can I do?
What can you do?
Talk me through this, because because I told you in the green room before, I'll go through these phases of doing fasting. That works for me. But then after I've done it for about a month, I'm like, oh my goodness me. And because I'm a social person within my business, networking all over the place, I'll go to the opening of an envelope. It's like, I'm there. We've just had an awards night. Drinks, drinking like a fish, which is not great for health, I might add. But my God, I'm a sociable person. I love it. So taking that away from me, then after a month, I'm done. I'm like, right, I'm just going to go back to it a bit again.
Yeah.
I've lost 2 stone. I'll just put it on again.
Yeah. And actually studies have shown that weight cycling, as in going up and down in weight, is quite detrimental to your health over a long period of time. So even though you feel like you're doing yourself a favor by losing weight, it's probably taking its toll. What you have to do is say, look, come on, let's be grown-ups about our health.
Yeah, let's be boring and miserable and cut everything out and just eat dust, right?
Yes, no.
Good.
Let's think about being a lot more patient. One of my coaches, Mark David, who is the founder of the Institute for the Psychology of Eating, he would always have this phrase like, sink into timelessness. And what he meant was, your health doesn't happen on your timescale. It's not like a menu, right? I want to be this weight by this date. I've got a wedding. It doesn't. Your body is an organism. So can we get on board with our bodies and actually work in partnership with this relationship, with this organism, and say, look, me and you, body, we're going through the whole of our life together. I'm going to be on your team. I'm not going to stand in the mirror and criticize you every day, but I'm going to do everything I can to support you in the long term. And then if you make a commitment to focusing on your strength and your health and your longevity in the long term, how does that change your day-to-day decisions then? If you're patient enough to say, well, okay, that means I don't make short-term decisions that are unsustainable, but it does mean that I try to evolve an identity as somebody who loves moving my body. And if I don't love moving my body, doing the marathons that I've been trying to make myself run, Can I try something else? Can I take a more experimental approach and keep trying things until I'm evolving a lifestyle that I can live forever? And ultimately, the healthy things that I do to support my body that make me feel good, if they are the things that could impact my weight, then they will. But they're not coming from a position of, I am no good and I have to fix myself at this moment. They're coming from a position of, I really care for my body and I'm going to be on my same team.
Sure.
Do you understand the difference there?
Yeah, well, I care, but I don't know. I like all the wrong things. So you mentioned marathons. I couldn't run a marathon. I can't run a bath, so.
But do you like Zumba or do you like to take a walk?
I like swimming.
All right. We all like something, right?
Hmm.
So can you do the thing that makes you feel alive, fully alive?
Well, I would if it wasn't 25 minutes away.
Uh-huh.
The swimming pool that I like to go to.
Yeah.
And the one that I used to like go to 10 minutes from my house is closed down. So you can't go there anymore. So it's like, great.
See, this is great though, because what you're doing now is you're thinking through your different options and your creative brain is trying to figure it out. And we are really creative, problem-solving creatures. And if we take away the shoulds from ourselves, then we can start to think in terms of, well, I wonder what I could do then. I wonder what would feel fun to keep doing. What would I not give up on after a couple of weeks? What would become so delicious and addictive in its well-being to me that I would want to keep doing it?
Sure.
And it might take a while where you go through and think, I can't take that much time out of my day to go to the pool and get changed and get dry and do my hair afterwards and all the rest of it, right?
Yeah.
And then you might think, well, let me start with a 10-minute walk. Let me start with getting some fresh air at lunchtime, or let me start with sitting down to eat instead of eating in my car. Or you might actually start to make some of the small low-hanging fruit changes that are always available to you instead of thinking that a big regime is what's needed and sticking to timings and sticking to calorie counts and something that's about thinking about what's realistic and what's personal to you.
Sure. Okay. Small bits. I like that. Just before we go any further, I just want to say a massive thank you to our sponsors of this podcast. And that is Boss Lowick Barbers in Falmouth. Now, you are based near Penryn, right?
Yes.
So have you ever heard of Boss Lowick Barbers at all?
No.
I know you wouldn't go there, obviously. It's for the men. So a massive thank you to them. Thank you very much for sponsoring the podcast. I want to get into non-diet weight loss methods. So what can we talk about that?
Have you ever heard of intuitive eating, Shane?
No.
Okay. Put it simply, intuitive eating and mindful eating, and those are the most talked about sort of or most known phrases in the world of eating psychology probably, are really about getting back in touch with your body's natural signals of hunger and fullness.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think in terms of calories, we're trying to use our intellect to tell us, right, that's where I stop. But what about getting in touch with your body's natural ability to say, I think I'm satisfied there, and cultivating that muscle within yourself? So if you start to, now for a lot of us, there are lots of reasons why we might have kind of disowned our body's natural sense of hunger and fullness, right? Mm-hmm. Right back to maybe your parents telling you to clean your plate. Because
crikey, Mum used to do that all the time. You're not leaving the table, you're eating everything. I'm full, Mum. No, you're gonna. There's kids in India,
Totally. So we override our body's natural ability to tell us when enough is enough. And I think when we're eating and we're working a lot, we're eating at a screen or we're multitasking a lot, we kind of miss out on the eating experience a lot. So we're just kind of trying to fuel the body without really giving ourselves the pleasure factor of the food. And you can't really cheat your biology in that way. We're designed to love food It's a biological imperative
Mm-hmm.
to love food, right? It's
Mm.
nature's reward for surviving, the same way as our sexual instinct is our reward for procreation. Like we are supposed to like it. There should be no shame attached with enjoying food, really. And yet, most of the time in our workday, and I'm as guilty of this as everyone else, right? I don't want everyone to think that because I'm an eating psychology coach, my eating is, 10 out of 10
Sure.
all the time.
Mm.
That we can find ourselves standing up at the kitchen counter if we're working from home, or grabbing something from a garage and eating it whilst we're driving somewhere.
Mm.
But later on in the day, you're likely to feel that you're owed an eating experience that you get to really dig into. And I can totally see how sitting down with a takeaway feels like, I've arrived. I got here. I did good today. And now I get to actually enjoy this. And I wonder if we were giving ourselves those experiences with food a bit more often, of really enjoying whatever it was that we've chosen to eat. Which is quite hard to do, actually, by the way, if you're constantly thinking, well, I shouldn't really be having this, but I am having it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're in that struggle with your own brain. So we're talking about, how do I get back in touch with my body's natural ability to tell me when I'm hungry? Can I wait until I'm hungry? You mentioned fasting, and I don't typically recommend that people adopt a regime that doesn't suit them. And as a former binge eater, fasting usually gives me a bit of a backlash, so I don't go there. But some people love it. But one thing that people do often report from fasting is that they didn't realize that they could sit with being hungry for a little bit and be comfortable with it after a while, be at ease, and it not be an emergency and a panic.
Sure.
And actually kind of getting calm and waiting until our body is actually genuinely hungry before we eat, then eating becomes a lot more, getting satisfied becomes a lot more of an easy thing. Because what is satisfaction other than not being hungry anymore? But if we're eating preemptively, so that in case we get hungry because we're scared of getting hungry, because we don't like the feeling, or because we think we're going to be in back-to-back Zoom meetings for 3 hours, so we better eat now because we can't later, then we never actually get that natural mechanism of like, oh, I am hungry. Oh, now I'm okay.
Yeah.
And it should be simple as that.
Sure.
But we've got, a 200 billion diet industry and an 80 billion fitness industry telling us, don't do it the way your body's designed to do it. Do it this way.
Yeah,
this is the magic way.
I mean, there's so much I can talk about with this, and because we're restricted to approximately 20 minutes, these podcasts, there's so many things I want to talk about, and like conditioning and things like that. Breakfast, dinner, or lunch, dinner, suppers, all these sort of things. You just constantly eating all the things. I'm not going to talk about that. As a recovering binge eater, what has that taught you?
I feel like what I've discovered is that when my binge eating was at its absolute zenith, when I was eating myself into a food coma every day, I was studying for my finals at university. And I have had periods of my life where my eating has gone like, oh, it's getting a bit crazy again. But I've never gone back to binge eating since recovering. But what I discovered was that it's the moments when you put the most pressure on yourself and you're trying your hardest, putting in the most effort, where we tend to seek relief. And eating is often an easy place for us to stop being so burdened by responsibility, to be like, ugh, I've been responsible for all this stuff all day. I've been trying so hard. Now let me not try. Now let me not be responsible even for myself. And I think that pattern of how we work and overwork and push ourselves and force ourselves, and how we end up overdoing things, whether that's overeating or over drinking or over scrolling on our phones, all of the compulsions, staying up late, watching Netflix, it's all backlash behavior, really. And so trying to address it and stamp it out is a limited solution. What we really need to be doing is looking at the attitude that we are putting into our daily lives, and how can I work more with myself and less bully myself and then need a reward or need relief. I think that's the biggest learning that I've got from it all. But in terms of what the ideal eating pattern looks like, I'm a really firm believer that every body and every way of eating is like a fingerprint, and that the best thing you can do is say, you know what, I'm the authority on my body. I know me, and I know my work life, and I know my routine, and I know my preferences, and I know I prefer swimming to running, right? And then you create your system. Don't try and do someone else's system. Bit by bit, commit yourself to evolving a system that's realistic and that you can keep for life and that works for you, and just keep building that. And if you find yourself making a mistake or getting thrown off course by a holiday, or we got Easter coming up, Easter egg influx, or all sorts of things, don't think I've fallen off the wagon. Just think, well, how can I find my way back onto my pathway quickly and without having to punish myself till I hate myself so badly I can't stand myself, and then I've got the energy to start some brutal regime.
Sure. Well, I want to go and get a small pasty now instead of my normal large. This has been an insightful podcast, and time has whistled by. I knew this would happen as well. It's such a big subject, but I have to just creep this in. Any last parting kind of in quotes? Anything that's motivated you in the past? Any famous people, non-famous people, something you've created yourself? Any kind of parting words?
Well, my first career was theatre, and I love to write. I used to edit for Guardian.com, and recently I've rediscovered thinking from a theatrical perspective a bit, and I've got this book.
Look at that!
It's a bit squashed by my bottom.
Okay.
I've just put it into, and now Eve Ensler, who calls herself V. Ensler, she's most known for the vagina monologues, right?
Right.
But what I didn't know was that she's written this book, The Good Body, which is similar to the vagina monologues. She goes around the world and she gathers stories on bellies.
Right.
People who are she's giving herself a hard time for not having a flat belly. And she gathers stories on bellies.
I feel a pain.
And if I just have a moment, I'll just read you a little bit from the very first page, because I think it's really pertinent to what we've been talking about.
Okay.
She's wondering in this passage why, given that with the vagina monologues, she came so close to seeing how women were brutally treated in war situations and were the victims of violence, why she's spending her time worrying about something as superficial as her belly when she knows there are global rights situations that need her attention.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, I see how other women's stomachs or butts or thighs or hair or skin have come to occupy their attention so much that we have very little left for the war in Iraq, or much else for that matter. When a group of ethnically diverse, economically disadvantaged women in the United States was recently asked about the one thing they would change in their lives if they could, the majority of these women said they would lose weight. And that touches me, because ultimately, on your deathbed, on my deathbed, I'm not going to be pleased looking back and saying, oh yeah, I'm really glad I spent all that time trying to get thinner thighs or trying to get a flat belly. Like, where should your energy really be going? Your contribution you want to make. And I think that's at the heart of the work that I'm doing, is to try and make people's relationship with food easier and occupy a lot less headspace, so that they can focus on stuff that really matters, stuff that the world needs us to put our energy into and make a proper contribution. And it may not be wars in Iraq, in, that showing the era of that book. But whatever it is that your talents are, that's where your energy is needed. And the rest is such a diversion and a distraction.
Well, that's a great way to finish the podcast. Thank you so much, Laura, for coming in today.
My
I've really
pleasure.
enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for sharing so much of your own story.
Yeah,
as part of this
I didn't expect I would do that, but I did.
I think, whenever we do that, it gives everybody permission to be their imperfect selves and we're all wrestling with this stuff, right?
I think we had a guest on here said, don't search for perfection because it really doesn't exist, really. You've just got to, take each day as it comes and follow the passion. But honestly, I've got to wrap this up. It's probably been one of my longest ones. I've been very, very naughty, but it's a fascinating subject, of course. Look, as always, I'd like to say a massive thank you to the producers of the show. And that is, of course, Megan and Jay. Thank you very much indeed. Also to Boss Slowick Barbers in Penryn. Thank you very much. Not Penryn, Falmouth. You're from Penryn. Boss Slowick Barbers are in Falmouth. Make sure you check them out. And also follow this lovely lady, Laura Lloyd. Until next time, have the most amazing remainder of your day. Thank you, Laura.